Let's move on to more AI news, but this time on the energy side. There's a great article in China Talk all about the transformer shortage. And we're not talking about the transformer architecture. We're talking about literal physical transformers. And the transformer shortage is choking the U.S. supply chain. If Trump wants to build, he needs an industrial policy for transformers. It doesn't matter if you want to build housing, AI data centers, renewable energy installations, EV charging stations, semiconductor fabs, or drone factories. You need transformers for all of the above. Not even the fossil fuel industry is exempt. Oil and gas drilling both require special transformers to supply power to rig machinery, compressors, refineries, and more. I was talking to there are nuclear power companies that want to deliver nuclear power to oil and gas drillers so that they can get more power to run their tools. People don't realize that you need a lot of energy to get the oil out of the ground often. And so these transformers are really key. And I haven't heard of any companies building these, so I thought it'd be an interesting deep dive. So technologically speaking, transformers are relatively simple. They were first invented in the 19th century. And yet the inability to build transformers is causing U.S. industrial policy to short circuit. In the words of the utility resource planner, A.J. Pandy, the transformer shortage is bad. It's like hair on fire, biting my nails, losing sleep levels of bad. If you build new multifamily housing, you could be looking at a 2.5 year wait for a transformer to supply the building. And that's if the manufacturers are even accepting orders. I had no idea. The Trump administration has ambitious plans for AI infrastructure, permitting reform, and offshore drilling projects. Without transformers, however, the U.S. is destined to remain a build-nothing country, no matter how many billions of dollars the federal government dishes out. So how did it get so bad? And that is an interesting question. COVID-19 impacted transformer supply chains, but a confluence of several demand-side factors extended the shortage. First, the U.S. grid is aging. We know this. Transformers are typically rated for 40 years of service, and much of the U.S. grid is reaching the end of its allocated life. And so just replacing and upgrading existing transformers is driving a ton of demand. Second, overall electrification is increasing nationally. Americans are using electricity instead of natural gas to cook their food, heat their homes, take hot showers, and this trend is effectively irreversible. And third, and perhaps most obviously, scores of new renewable energy projects and EV charging stations require transformers to come online. Newly leased offshore drilling projects will have a similar effect. And so we want to do more with transformers, and yet the supply side is not keeping up. And so the NIAC,
the children, we need to get children to stop playing Minecraft and start mining coal. They clearly yearn for the mines. Let's make them productive.
Yeah, the answer is clearly a steampunk future with me on an airship twirling my mustache, powered by coal and steam. Steam revolution. That's the end. That's the end goal for sure.
Back to blimps. Yeah,
blimps for sure. Yeah, I saw a fantastic photo of the Hindenburg docked at the Chrysler Building. Incredible.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was the Empire State. Like, it's so ridiculous. It just looks so cool and futuristic. But at the same time, I think it's more like I think blimps are more like unicycles than anything else, where it's like novel, but then there's so many drawbacks that it just doesn't make sense. So I think I'm anti-blimp, anti-train, and I just want supersonic jets and rockets, really. Anyway, the NIAC identified 4 structural supply side challenges in a report released in June of last year. Labor shortages. The U.S. does not have an effective pipeline to train and retain the manufacturing talent. We've seen this in so many different industries. There's a historic industry cyclicality. There's been a strong correlation between transformer demand and the housing market. And so when the housing market took off in the early 2000s, transformer production followed. But then when the market crashed, caused many manufacturers to exit the market. There's also a lack of standardization. It's difficult to efficiently scale up production with a custom product. And so utilities are very specific about their transformers. There's no standardization, really. Every utility has its own specification. If you're a small utility, you're asking for a very, very small batch of this very bespoke thing. And there's also a material shortage. Transformers are made with grain-oriented electrical steel, GOES. Never heard that term before. glad to know it now. But there's only one domestic manufacturer who is unable to meet demand. Contributing factors include the destruction of the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol and sanctions against Russian steel producers, rising demand for non-oriented electrical steel, a key ingredient in EVs that comes from the same manufacturing facilities, will also increase supply tension. The net result is that domestic supply can only meet 20% of transformer demand, and transformer prices have risen 60 to 80% since 2020. Not good stuff. Should we go into physical attack? This is a great one. So
crazy.
A 2014 analysis by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FERC, identified 30 critical high voltage substations in the national grid and predicted that losing just 9 of these substations as the result of a coordinated attack could cause a nationwide blackout lasting for weeks or even months. And so this is your call to action. Become a prepper. Get a generator, a diesel generator, get a battery pack, get a Starlink. If you have a family, you should be investing in this stuff because the power grid is sadly very, very fragile. That report is 10 years old, but according to an NPR interview with Richard Moroz, former president of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, the situation today is not substantially different. Knocking out those high-impact facilities is probably harder than everyone would think, but he did not say that the underlying grid infrastructure had become less centralized. What kind of security measures are in place to protect these high-impact facilities? According to Politico, protections include armed security staff, bullet-resistant fencing, or video monitoring. But these measures may not be enough to protect against a major blackout. In 2022 alone, there were a total of 1,600 security incidents involving the U.S. power grid, including 60 incidents that led to outages. Notable cases include the 2013 Metcalf sniper attack and the 2022 attack on substations in Moore County, North Carolina. In both cases, the perpetrators were never caught. And so basically, people just go and buy a sniper rifle or a long-range assault rifle, and then they just take pot shots at the substation. And if they hit any critical piece of in the chain, one wire, one bolt, anything, it can knock out the entire grid. It's like an extremely high leverage terrorist activity for a crazy person. And they could have any sort of motives. They could be left wing, right wing. They could be international.
It's like one person, a $300 rifle and potentially millions of dollars, or, God forbid, billions of damage.
And so you think about the arson that happened in LA and the potential for that. Like, there are a lot of people that want to have like a high leverage terroristic impact. And these electrical substations are sadly one of the most high leverage places to have something like this happen.
Anecdote. My mom was buying a condo and was in escrow, and they were waiting on a transformer to be able to power the building. And it dragged on every single day, every single week. They'd say like, hey, we're expecting this like in the next week. Just dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, actually for months. And she eventually just bailed and bought another place because she was like, I'm not just going to keep waiting around for this, this thing that who knows when it's going to come, basically. So actively, slowing down various aspects of the economy.
Yeah, I wonder if I can find this Will Manitis tweet. I know he's talked about it. Transformer. Yeah, this is it. He tells the story of Metcalf here. We should just read through this because it's so interesting. 26K likes. It's a banger, folks. On April 16th, 2013, a team of highly skilled gunmen opened fire on the Metcalf's power substation in San Jose, California. In just under 10 minutes, they disabled 17 transformers and caused $15 million in damages. This is the most important terror attack you've never heard of. Quick thread. The PG&E Metcalf station provides most of Santa Clara Valley with power. Facebook, Stanford, etc. are all on this grid. The attackers are still unknown. They were never caught, and the motive is still unknown. This is so crazy. It sounds just like complete conspiracy theory because, of course, when you don't have an answer, you're just going to generate theories, and who knows, and they're going to be hard to verify. A timeline of the attack, but all this is factual, like facts. It's just no one knows how to piece all these facts together. At 12:58 a.m. in the middle of the night, fiber optic lines were cut not far from the U.S. Route 101, just outside the South San Jose, just outside of South San Jose. The substation loses internet and phone service. At 1:07 a.m., some customers lost service. Cables in its vault near the Metcalfe substation were also cut. 1:31 a.m., a surveillance camera pointed along a chain link fence around the substation recorded a streak of light that investigators from the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office think was a signal from a waved flashlight. Like, I'm ready to go. It was followed by the muzzle flash of rifles. At 1:37 a.m., PG&E received an alarm from motion sensors at the substation, possibly from bullets grazing the fence. At 1:41 a.m., Santa Clara County's Sheriff Department received a 911 call about gunfire sent by an engineer at a nearby power plant that still had phone service. At 1:45 a.m., the first bank of transformers riddled with bullet holes and having leaked 52,000 U.S. gallons of oil overheated, whereupon PG&E's control center, about 90 miles north, received an equipment failure alarm. At 1:50, another flashlight signal caught on film marked the end. More than 100 expended 7.62 by 39 millimeter cases were later found at the site. At 1:51, officers arrived and found everything quiet. Unable to get past the locked fence and seeing nothing suspicious, they left. In the subsequent investigation, it became incredibly clear how professional of an operation this was. Of the 100 shell casings found, all had been wiped clean of fingerprints. There were also stacks of rocks found all over the site, commonly used to gauge firing distance. So they measured, they put down rocks. This rock means we're 200 meters away, 200 yards away, and so you need to adjust your dope accordingly, essentially.
Yeah.
They knew where to attack. Yeah.
Just to kind of get into who might potentially be the culprit. If anybody that listens to the show that follows Josh Steinman, he's
I knew you were going to say
notorious for saying, "Good morning, we are going to win" almost every day. And then also, anytime something like this happens, he'll quote tweet and say how many U.S. or how many foreign sabotage teams are operating on U.S. soil. And so he was within the 2016 Trump, White House, working on national security, has a military background. And so he had actually a lot of exposure. A lot of times these attacks happen and the government figures out what happens, but they don't necessarily deliver that to the press and the media because the government doesn't want the citizenry to feel like they're constantly under attack or there's sort of these missions being carried out. But it's very, something like this to me screams like foreign sabotage more so than such a professional job. Who else would really have the incentive to do this other than, a foreign adversary that just wants to cause chaos, U.S. and test things, right? So
yeah, totally. I'm staring at the tinfoil hat. It's just out of reach, but just thinking about like if me and a bunch of guys wanted to go do something in a foreign country, could we get there on a tourist visa, overstay that visa, start acquiring weapons? There's a million weapons all over America. You go to some gun shows, buy some stuff, figure out some back routes, buy all the gear, plan all this out. Like this does not seem like, like a moon landing level effort. This feels like a couple guys from a pretty sharp team putting some work in, some planning, and then going and executing it with, a couple months of prep, and they get a pretty crazy outcome. There's been a lot of conspiracy theories about whether this was, a test of the system or an attack from an adversary, or maybe just political extremists who are, Americans and they want to cause chaos for one reason or another. It's hard to say, but the important thing is that.
It's a relevant repost from Bill Ackman, who reposted within the last 24 hours from his account that has 1.6 million followers.
Wow.
If you are not a conspiracy theorist by now, you are basically the R word. And so
okay,
little aggressive,
buddy.
Clean it up. remix it to be, say,
Yeah.
if you're not a
Ackman, what would
conspiracy
your mother
theorist,
say?
you're just silly. If you're not a
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist by now, you're just silly.
You're
That
silly.
hits pretty hard too.
Yeah.
So mix it up,
No,
Ackman. But
I have long said that conspiracy theories, like, if it's a conspiracy theory and it comes true, it's just history. Like 9/11, the default narrative on 9/11, which is that bin Laden determined to attack, that was a conspiracy theory. Let's define it. Was it a conspiracy? Absolutely. It was a bunch of guys in a far off land literally conspiring to attack America. And then the second question is, was there a theory? Absolutely, because the CIA wrote a memo theorizing that bin Laden was determined to attack. And so the CIA basically said, hey, we are in the business of crafting theories about conspiracies. We think we are on to a conspiracy. And then it came true. And so now it's just true.
So
it's
if you
history.
actually
and so
ignore the theory aspect, the definition of a conspiracy is a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful, or the action of plotting. So whenever something happens, it's usually because a small group of people plotted to do something. Now you don't know
the opposite is when you're building in public, or when you're
invading
a politician country, and you're on the campaign trail and you say, if elected, I'm going to cut taxes or I'm going to raise taxes, and then you do it. That's not a conspiracy. You did it out in the open. You said you were going to do something, and then you did it.
Or
like
harmful.
The Tesla secret plan, that is not a conspiracy. There are conspiracies that happen all over the place, but not everything is conspiracy. But sometimes there are conspiracies that happen, and if someone is onto it ahead of time and has a theory about it, it is technically a conspiracy theory. And so we almost need a different word to denote a conspiracy theory that you think is wrong versus a conspiracy theory that you think is correct, because obviously there are two paths that these things can take.
Yeah, and we obviously we keep a tinfoil hat on the set. It's usually within reach of me, and you're a good counterbalance to me, because I'll have some crazy theory and you'll be like, oh, like, seems complicated. It could be a lot more simple and less nefarious than that.
Yeah, I usually just like to go back to is there some sort of market pressure? Does this conspiracy theory require me to suspend the idea that people are rational economic actors? Okay, that's going to be a lot harder. But when you look at this, it's like, if you're a country that's competing with America, and you can send a group of 5 dudes over to America and just wreak some havoc for $100K in flights and gear.
Yeah,
that's going to be a great ROI.
LA,
and so that's that doesn't break my world model to consider that this might be foreign interference.
A lot of the moms and wellness girlies in LA had heard that Iran had posted like a day before the fires, which they always post. They always post. They're posters over there. And they had posted, in the coming days, the United States will experience a, catastrophe. The world will experience a catastrophe, the likes of which it has never seen. And then as it became obvious that there was arson happening and these fires didn't all start organically, then the conspiracy theory windmill started turning. But then since then, we've established that, it was arson, but we still don't really know what happened, who did it, what the motive was. Was it mental illness? Was it homeless people? Was it, they
just got away with it. I don't know if we'll ever know. This is 12 years ago at this point, and there's no evidence. There's nothing to go off of. There's no threads to pull. It's like, they got the shell casings. There were no fingerprints. What are you going to do? Anyway, there are other problems with the transformer shortage. Mainly one is that a lot of these transformers come from China, $54 billion exactly in 2022. In 2023, China was the USA's third largest supplier of transformer components by value, selling American customers $375 million worth of parts of electrical transformers, static converters. Only Mexico and Canada outranked China by value. Chinese-made components represent 15% of America's imports in this category. This might not sound like much until you remember that this calculation is by value. Since the exchange rate is kept artificially low, China likely provides a disproportionate volume of these components compared to other trade partners. The picture gets worse when you consider imports of whole completed transformers. The OEC reports that China was the USA's #1 supplier of transformers and transformer components in 2022, exporting $5.47 billion worth of product to the USA. And so, however, for the large power transformers that are most critical, China is the 6th largest exporter. So it's not all bad news, but it is very rough, and you could see that this could become one of the poker chips on the bargaining table in the tariffs. We're restricting chips, but chips aren't the only thing we need to build these AI data centers. If we want dominance in artificial intelligence, we need transformers too. And if China cuts us off, that's going to be a significant setback. So lots of we never talk about politics, but geopolitics always finds a way in with these stories. So let's wrap up the transformer discussion and see how they close this out by supplementing the 2020 Transformer Executive Order with real industrial policy. The Trump administration has a huge opportunity to jumpstart the construction of housing, factories, and energy infrastructure in the United States. I love the sound of that. I think that should be bipartisan. We all want to build more stuff. To close, we'll leave you with a full list of policy recommendations from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, the NIAC. They recommend that the federal government craft policies and designate funding targeting at increasing domestic capacity. They want to use the CHIPS Act as a model. They recommend convening all parties who drive demand to achieve greater accuracy in transformer demand forecasting. So everyone who's buying transformers, let's get them all in a room. And let's say, how many transformers do you actually want? How many do you need? Stargate, like how many transformers do you actually need? Crusoe, let's get you in here and see, so that we have an accurate plan of what we need to build domestically, how important are the tariffs, et cetera. They recommend encouraging long-term contracts and customer commitments. They recommend establishing strategic reserve of transformers with the U.S. government as the buyer of last resort. And they recommend that the government promote collaboration between design engineers from utilities and domestic manufacturers with the goal of standardizing transformer design and reducing complexity. And so there's a couple others here, but basically you need to grow the pipeline of qualified workers in the transformer manufacturing industry, and also ensure sufficient supply of electrical steel by coordinating incentives. So a lot of work to do on industrial policy there, but hopefully green shoots ahead. What you got?
I got a good transition to some actually breaking news from the Reindustrialized Summit.
Let's do it.
Aaron Slodov and Austin Bishop actually just sent us this while we were live. They just announced Reindustrialize 2.0 is returning to Detroit. So if you don't know, Reindustrialize is a basically conference to get all the different policymakers, investors, and founders together in a single room to figure out how we're going to reindustrialize the United States. Right? This is one of the top sort of national security issues of our time, and it's going to take. My hotel's calling me to kick me out of the room. Hopefully it's not too loud. But anyways, really exciting event. They did it last year. It was a huge success. They have people like Dan Gilbert, who was, started Rocket Mortgage and owns the Cavs and is part of StockX. And he's going to be hosting it. So they're going to, pull out all the stops. It's going to be an amazing event. There was a lot of good stories that came out of it last year. I was having my second child literally the same week that it was happening last year. I think you were in the boat, so we both couldn't go, but we'll have to go there this year.
But one of the guys who's working on it, Mike Slay, I went to his previous conference, the Defense Tech Ventures Summit in DC. That was fantastic, really well executed. I gave a talk on stage. The mics worked great. There were tons of cameras. All my slides were up. They looked great. It was a lot of fun and a really great community, and really top founders went. And so highly recommend checking out Industrialize, signing up, getting on the list. Massive demand, and I'm sure it'll be a huge, huge event. Hopefully we can get out there, but if not, I'm sure we'll be live streaming it and reacting to the show as it goes on. I think that'd be really cool to do.